What would you do if a pack of frozen wolves appeared from the woods, not to attack you, but to beg you for help? When a man follows him into an abandoned house, he uncovers a secret so disturbing, it will change everything you believe about fear. Stay with me till the end, because what happens inside will leave you speechless. Frozen Wolves begs man to enter the house. He's shocked by what happens next. Snow whirled like shards of glass across the barren road. The man pulled his coat tighter, his breath rising in white clouds. From the trailing, shadows emerged. Wolves. Their fur was matted with frost, their eyes pale as cracked ice. They did not snarl. They did not lunge. Instead, they crouched low, their bodies trembling, their heads bowed as if pleading. The man froze, heart hammering. Wolves did not beg. One stepped forward, dragging a paw stiff with frozen blood. It whined softly, then turned its gaze toward the abandoned house, standing crooked at the edge of the woods. The man's skin prickled. The house leaned under the weight of snow, its windows black and hollow, its door hanging crooked. The wolves shifted, their breath steaming in the bitter air, their eyes never leaving his. It was not hunger in their gaze. It was desperation. The man's boots crunched over ice as he stepped closer. The wolves parted silently, as though guiding him toward the sagging porch. The wood groaned under his weight. Every instinct screamed to turn back. Yet the wolves pressed closer, whimpering, urging him on. The door creaked wider without his touch. A wave of cold air poured out, sharper and heavier than the storm itself. The man staggered as the smell hit him. It was not rot. It was not dust. It was something metallic, something thick. The wolves howled once, low and mournful, their voices rattling the glass in the windows. The man stepped inside. The floorboards moaned beneath him, sagging as though alive. Shadows writhed across the walls though no flame burned. His throat tightened as he felt the air pulse, cold and wet against his skin. A whisper brushed past his ear, thin as smoke. The door slammed shut behind him. The wolves outside erupted in frantic cries. Their claws scraped the wood, their bodies hurling against it, as if trying to tear it down. The whisper returned, stronger, curling through his skull like ice water. It spoke his name. The man staggered, pressing his hands against his ears. But the voice was inside, pressing deeper, wrapping around his thoughts. The walls shivered as though breathing. A low vibration crawled through the floorboards and into his legs. His vision blurred, the edges of the room melting like frost under fire. He stumbled forward, reaching for the nearest wall. His fingers sank into the wood. It was soft. It pulsed. Warmth bled through his skin, not the warmth of life, but the feverish heat of something festering. He yanked his hand back, trembling, a smear of black liquid clinging to his palm. The whisper shifted, no longer one voice, but many. Some were pleading, some were screaming, some laughed in jagged, broken tones. His knees weakened as he stared down the hallway. The walls rippled, lined with shapes that pressed outward as if trapped beneath the surface. Faces, eyes wide, mouths open in silent agony, sealed into the flesh of the house. The man's breath caught in his throat. The wolves outside wailed, claws tearing at the door, their desperation rising. The floor buckled suddenly, slamming him to his knees. The black liquid spread across the boards, twisting upward in tendrils, clutching at his arms. The whispers grew deafening, each syllable stabbing into his skull. The shapes in the walls turned their eyes toward him, and every mouth opened at once. The house screamed. The sound pierced his chest like shards of ice. He clutched his head, his ears ringing, his teeth rattling. The scream was not just noise. It was inside him, ripping through his veins, dragging something out. The tendrils coiled tighter around his wrists, pulling him toward the floor. The board split, revealing a pit of blackness that breathed like a lung. Cold wind surged upward, reeking of rust and soil long buried. The man tried to pull free, his muscles burning, but the house held him fast. The faces in the walls twisted, their eyes rolling, their mouths still open in endless cries. The wolves outside battered the door harder, their bodies slamming against the wood until cracks splintered through it. The man gasped as the black pit below him widened. Hands rose from the void, pale and broken, clutching, clawing. Their fingers were sharp as bone, slick with tar. They reached for him with desperate hunger. The man's throat tore with a scream of his own as he kicked against the boards. The wolves outside howled, their voices frantic, desperate, a chorus of sorrow and rage. The door shuddered under their assault. The man's body lurched downward, the pit swallowing his legs. The whispers fused into a single word that thundered inside his skull. Stay. His body convulsed as the word carved itself into his bones. The pit pulled harder, dragging him inch by inch into its hollow throat. The air thickened, pressing against his chest, until each breath scraped like broken glass. The wolves' claws tore through the wood, splinters flying as the door buckled. The faces in the walls leaned forward, stretching, their lips peeling back in grotesque grins. Their eyes burned white, glowing through the dim haze. The man thrashed wildly, his nails raking his own skin as the tendrils surged up his arms. His boots vanished beneath the floor, swallowed whole by the black pit. The whisper returned, softer now, almost tender. Stay. His vision pulsed, blurring with streaks of red and shadow. The wolves broke through at last, the door exploding inward in a shower of shards. Their bodies stormed the room, their eyes blazing with fury. They lunged not at him, but at the tendrils. Their teeth sank into the black coils, ripping, tearing, their howls shaking the trembling walls. The man's body lurched upward as the grip on him faltered. But the pit screamed, a roar that cracked the ceiling and showered the room with falling plaster and ice. The house itself seemed alive, writhing, fighting, shrieking in rage. The man's arms burned as the wolves tugged, dragging him free from the hungry dark. His body slammed onto boards, chest heaving, skin slick with sweat and black stains. The pit gate below, furious, boiling, its tendrils whipping in blind fury. The wolves circled him, snarling at the abyss. And then the house began to close the wound in the floor, as if sealing its hunger away, as if saving him for later. The man crawled backward, his palms slipping on the black slime that streaked the boards. The wolves stood rigid, their fur bristling, their growls rolling like distant thunder. The floor sealed shut with a wet snap, the tendrils vanishing beneath the wood. Silence fell, sudden and heavy. Only the sound of his ragged breathing broke it. The faces in the walls no longer writhed. They stared blankly, eyes dim, as though asleep. The man's pulse pounded in his ears, his body shaking from the cold that clung to him like chains. One wolf stepped forward, its eyes locked with his, pale and glassy, but sharp with purpose. It lowered its head and pressed its muzzle against his hand. His skin tingled where it touched him, the black stain burning faintly. He tried to speak, but his throat produced only a rasp. The wolves turned toward the open doorway, their movements urgent. One barked sharply, snapping him out of his daze. They wanted him to follow. The man staggered to his feet, every muscle heavy, as if weighted by stone. Behind him, the house groaned. The walls expanded and contracted, a slow breath that rattled the window frames. A faint whisper slithered through the cracks, curling around his name once more. Stay. His legs trembled. For a moment he felt the pull, the sick gravity of that voice. But the wolves growled in unison, snapping their jaws, breaking the spell. They rushed into the storm outside, their tails lashing like whips. The man forced himself forward, each step a battle, until the icy wind struck his face again. The house loomed behind, shuddering, its black windows watching. The wolves circled him, guiding him away from it, deeper into the blizzard. And though the wind howled, though the snow blinded him, he could still hear the whisper. It followed. It waited. Stay. The storm swallowed the path ahead, erasing earth and sky into a single white abyss. The wolves pressed close, their bodies forming a shield against the cutting wind. Their fur shimmered faintly, as if the frost clinging to them was alive. The man stumbled forward, his breath breaking, his body near collapse. But the wolves did not slow. They moved with purpose, their paws silent on the frozen ground. Behind them, the house groaned once more, a hollow sound that rolled across the blizzard like thunder. The man dared not look back, yet he felt it, the weight of its stare. The whisper crept again into his skull, softer now, more insidious. Stay. It no longer sounded like a command. It sounded like an invitation. He shook his head, forcing his legs to move, but the voice tugged at his memory. It curled through moments he had forgotten, his childhood room, a lullaby his mother once sang, the smell of wood smoke on winter nights. The house was stealing his memories, reshaping its voice into the things he trusted most. His chest heaved with dread. One wolf growled sharply, snapping its teeth, and the voice faltered for a heartbeat. The man collapsed to his knees, snow burning against his skin. The wolves encircled him, their breaths steaming, their bodies rigid, ears pressed flat. The blizzard shifted. Through the white veil a shape loomed. Not the house. Something else. Tall, silent, unmoving. Its outline wavered, as though the storm itself was wearing a body. The wolves snarled, their fur bristling like spears. The man lifted his head, his eyes watering against the wind, and the figure stepped closer. The snow parted around it, spiraling upward as though it bowed to its presence. Its form was blurred, neither man nor beast, a shifting silhouette that bent the storm to its will. The air grew sharper, cutting into the man's lungs with each breath. The wolves pressed tighter around him, hackles raised, their growls vibrating through the frozen ground. The figure's head tilted, slow and deliberate, as if studying him, though its face was hidden. He felt its gaze pierce through his skin, deep into the marrow of his bones. The whisper returned, but it was no longer behind him. It came from the figure. Stay. The words slid into him, heavier than before, dragging against the edges of his will. The wolves howled in unison, their voices fierce and unbroken, shaking the sky. The figure paused, the storm hesitating with it. The man's heart pounded so violently he thought his ribs would split. Every instinct screamed to run, yet his legs refused to obey. The snow beneath the figure darkened, melting into black liquid that spread across the white like ink. The wolves snarled, their teeth flashing, their bodies trembling with rage. The man's vision swam as the black stain spread wider, reaching for him. His hands burned, the mark from the house glowing faintly beneath his skin. The figure raised one arm. The storm fell silent. The world stopped breathing, and the man felt the ground open beneath him once again. The crack beneath him split wide, a jagged mouth in the snow that exhaled bitter heat. The wolves lunged, snapping at the black liquid, as it surged upward like a tide. The man pitched forward, his arms flailing, the pull of the chasm stronger than his own weight. One wolf clamped its jaws around his coat, yanking him back with a violent jerk. His shoulders screamed with pain, but he stayed above the abyss. The figure advanced, each step soundless, its shape unraveling into tendrils of storm and shadow. The whisper struck again, louder now, rattling his skull. Stay. The man's vision blurred, his grip on the world slipping as the word pressed down on him. He felt the snow harden beneath his hands, then soften, then pulse like flesh. The wolves attacked the figure, leaping into the swirl of shadow. Their teeth tore through its edges, but the storm bent with them, reforming around their bodies. Their snarls filled the night, defiant, furious. The man staggered to his feet, chest burning, his body trembling as though frost had invaded his blood. The crack beneath him widened again, spewing the stench of rust and rot. The black liquid reached for his legs, hissing as it touched the snow. The figure raised both arms. The storm obeyed. The wind howled like 100 voices screaming at once, and the world turned blind. The man covered his face, the air slicing his skin raw. But through the blizzard, through the deafening roar, he felt something grip his wrist. Not cold, not shadow, a hand, warm, human. His breath caught in his throat as the warmth spread through his arm. It was impossible. It felt alive. He dared to look through the screaming snow, eyes stinging as ice cut his lashes. A figure stood before him, not the storm-born shadow, but clear, solid, and human. A woman. Her skin glowed faintly, pale as moonlight against the endless white. Her eyes met his, and they burned with sorrow too deep to name. Her lips parted, but no sound carried, only the movement of her mouth. He strained to hear, though the storm devoured every word. The wolves froze mid-snarling, their eyes wide, their bodies lower to the snow as though bowing. The shadow recoiled, its tendrils thrashing, the storm buckling around it. The woman squeezed his wrist, and the mark on his hand seared with light. The pain was blinding, as if fire had been pressed into his flesh. He cried out, falling to one knee, but the grip did not release. Instead, it grew stronger, pouring strength into him like water into parched earth. The whisper roared in his head, furious, breaking into jagged syllables. "Stay." The woman's eyes flared, and at last, her voice cut through the storm. "Not stay. Run." The word tore through him like lightning, sharp and undeniable. Run. It shook loose the fog in his mind, shattering the weight of the shadow's command. His legs jolted with strength, his chest filling with air that burned but did not collapse. The wolves leapt back to him, their bodies pressing against his sides, urging him forward. The shadow writhed, its form unraveling, stretching across the snow like a black tide. Its voice howled in rage, splitting into 1,000 fractured echoes. "Stay! Stay!" The ground quaked beneath them, the crack widening once more, hungry and endless. The woman's grip tightened, and she pulled him sharply, pointing to the storm with her other hand. For a heartbeat, the snow parted, revealing a path, a dark line of forest, distant yet clear, a place beyond the storm's reach. The wolves surged toward it, their bodies cutting through the snow like arrows. The man stumbled after them, dragged by the woman's impossible strength. His feet struck ice, earth, and air all at once, the world shifting under him like a dream trying to collapse. The shadow shrieked, the sound clawing at his spine, but its tendrils faltered, unable to cross the light that spilled from the woman's touch. The storm closed in behind them, devouring the path as soon as it opened. The man's lungs tore for breath, each step a battle against the cold weight dragging at his heels. The forest loomed nearer, its trees black spires against the white. But the woman's hand grew colder. The warmth faded, her grip weakening. He turned his head in panic. Her eyes met his one last time, and she whispered, almost lost in the howl of the wind, "Do not let it follow." Her hand slipped from his wrist, leaving only the sting of the fading mark. The cold rushed in, gnawing at his skin where her warmth had been. He staggered, nearly falling, but the wolves pressed close, forcing him onward. The storm behind him twisted, screaming with the voice of the shadow. It clawed at the sky, tearing streaks of darkness through the snow. The forest stood only steps away now, the trees looming like black guardians. The wolves darted ahead, vanishing between the trunks, their eyes flashing like silver lanterns. The man stumbled across the threshold of snow into earth, his boots sinking into frozen soil. The blizzard faltered at the edge, as though the forest itself barred its entrance. For the first time, there was silence. He gasped for air, his chest heaving, his body trembling with exhaustion. Then, faintly, from beyond the storm, he heard her voice again. It was not a whisper this time. It was a scream. "Do not let it follow." The man spun toward the white wall of snow, his pulse hammering, and through it he saw a movement. A shadow, taller now, dragging itself forward. The storm bent around it, thinning, pushing against the forest barrier. The wolves snarled low, their bodies rigid, their teeth bared. The man clutched his burning hand, the mark searing as if it knew what was coming. The shadow pressed closer, its edges stretching long and thin, reaching for the trees. And then he saw them, dozens of pale faces in the storm, drifting like lost souls, their mouths opening in unison. Not whispers, not screams. They were chanting his name. The sound crawled over his skin, sinking into his bones like ice water. Each syllable dragged heavier, echoing in the pit of his stomach. The wolves snapped at the air, their howls slicing through the chant, trying to drown it out. The man clutched his ears, but the voices were inside him, threading through his veins. The storm thinned further, and the shadow's form grew clearer. It towered above the faces, its limbs bending at wrong angles, its body woven from writhing black strands. The pale mouths in the blizzard did not stop. They stretched wider, wider still, until the sound was no longer his name, but something deeper. A pull, a claim. The mark on his hand blazed, light searing through the cracks in his skin. He screamed, dropping to his knees as the pain flared white-hot. The wolves surrounded him, pressing tight, their bodies braced against the forest edge. The shadow reached out, a single tendril sliding into the tree line. The forest groaned. The trunks shivered, their bark splitting with the sound of bone cracking. The chant grew louder, rattling the ground, making the air vibrate like a drum. The man lifted his head, tears freezing on his cheeks. He saw the wolves' eyes fixed on him, expectant, urgent, as if they knew, as if they waited for him to act. The mark on his hand pulsed again, stronger, burning like fire. And suddenly he understood. The light was not meant for him to endure. It was meant to be unleashed. The realization struck him with the weight of a falling stone. His hand trembled, the mark searing, begging to break open. The wolves pressed closer, their growls turning into deep, resonant howls that shook the branches overhead. The shadow paused, its tendril hovering, sensing the shift. The faces in the storm faltered in their chant, their mouths twitching as if unsure. The man raised his burning hand. Light spilled from the cracks in his skin, faint at first, then surging, flooding the air with a blinding glow. The forest groaned again, but not in pain. This time it was alive, resonant, as though awakening. The tendril recoiled, smoke hissing where the light touched it. The shadow screamed, a sound not made for human ears, shrill and jagged, splitting the silence like glass shattering. The wolves howled with it, but their voices wove into the light, fueling it, binding it. The man felt the mark rip wide open, the skin splitting, not with blood but with fire. The blaze surged outward, a wave of brilliance that tore across the forest's edge. The faces in the storm shrieked, twisting into smoke as the light passed through them. The shadow writhed violently, its limbs flailing, its body collapsing inward as though devoured by its own darkness. The blizzard shattered. Snow whipped upward in a spiral, then vanished, leaving only stillness. The man collapsed to the ground, his chest heaving, his hand smoking where the mark had been. The wolves circled him, silent now, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The forest stood quiet, its branches heavy with frost, no longer trembling. But deep within the silence, behind the quiet trees, a sound lingered, a whisper, low, broken. Stay. The man's head snapped up, his breath catching in his throat. The whisper was faint, yet it slithered through the stillness like smoke through cracks. The wolves growled low, their ears pressed flat, their bodies rigid once more. The mark on his hand had burned away, but the skin was raw, glowing faintly as though something still pulsed beneath. He pushed himself to his feet, legs trembling, every muscle aching as if drained. The forest was too quiet. No wind, no birds, no life, only the way of that word, stretched thin, echoing from somewhere deeper. Stay. The man's chest tightened. It was not behind him now. It was ahead, inside the forest. The wolves turned their heads, noses lifting, eyes narrowing, as if they sensed it too. One barked sharply, then darted forward between the trees. Another followed, then the rest, vanishing into the shadows without hesitation. The man stood frozen, torn between dread and the pull of the unknown. His breath smoked in the still air, each exhale louder than the silence itself. The whisper returned, closer this time, curling inside his ear like a secret. Stay. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, came another voice. Not the shadow's. Hers. Run, his heart lurched at the sound, his body torn between the two voices. One coiled around him like chains, heavy and cold. The other cut sharp and fleeting, fragile as glass yet fierce enough to break through. The wolves' howls echoed from deep in the forest, sharp and insistent, pulling him forward. The trees loomed, black against the pale snow, their branches tangled like grasping fingers. The man staggered after them, his boots crunching on the frozen ground, each step a battle against the weight pressing at his back. The whisper followed, weaving through the trunks, threading through the silence. Stay. The word thickened, heavier now, as if the forest itself was speaking. Shadows swayed between the trees, figures that shifted when he looked, vanishing when he blinked. His breath came ragged, his throat raw. Yet he pressed on, guided only by the faint glow of the wolf's eyes ahead. The air grew colder, sharper, slicing his lungs with every inhale. Snow no longer fell, yet frost thickened around the trunks, spiraling upward like veins of ice. He stumbled into a clearing. The wolves stood waiting, their bodies tense, their gaze fixed on something in the center. At first, he thought it was another tree, crooked and black. Then he saw the outline of a door standing alone, upright in the snow, framed by nothing, leaning against nothing. The whisper swelled, flooding the clearing. "Stay." The wolves snarled, their teeth bared, their eyes blazing in the dim light. The man's hand burned again, though the mark was gone. And from behind the door, he heard her voice once more. "Run." The man staggered toward the door, his breath loud in the frozen clearing. The wolves flanked him, their eyes fixed, their bodies taut with anticipation. The whisper pressed harder now, seeping through the cracks of the wood, drowning out the forest. "Stay." It was no longer one voice. It was countless. Every face he had seen in the house, every scream buried in the storm. The wolves howled as one, their voices slicing through the weight of it, holding the clearing together. His hand throbbed, fire pulsing beneath his skin, guiding him closer. He reached for the handle. It burned cold against his palm. The whisper surged, furious, wrapping around his heart, trying to drag him down. But then her voice cut through, clear and strong. "Run." With a cry, he pulled the door open. Light exploded outward, a flood that washed over clearing, tearing the shadows apart. The whisper fractured into silence. The wolves howled in triumph, their voices echoing through the forest as the light swallowed everything. When the brilliance faded, the clearing was empty. The door was gone. The snow lay untouched, smooth and silent beneath the trees. The wolves sat around him, their breath calm, their bodies still. One stepped forward, pressed his muzzle to his hand, and then turned toward the woods. One by one, they vanished into the darkness. The man stood alone, his chest heaving, the mark on his hand no longer burning but warm, steady, alive. The forest was quiet now. No whispers, no storm, only the sound of his own breath and the faint memory of her voice still lingering in the air. "Run." And for the first time, he did not look back.